Flight 324 of Lux Sky Airline, a renowned company in the field of high-end travel, had the appearance of an uneventful trip. The plane, a majestic Boeing 787, glided silently through the sky, its engines purring like a soft murmur, while the passengers sat comfortably in their leather chairs. The hostesses and stewards moved through the aisles, dressed in their impeccably cut uniforms, their cordial smiles and precise gestures contributing to the elegant atmosphere of the aircraft. The dim lighting in the cabin provided a touch of luxurious comfort, and the subtle scent of incense wafting through the air added to the refined ambience. For travelers who had paid the full price, this flight was an opportunity to escape, relax, and quickly reach their destinations without the slightest worry. But for the Johnson family, this theft would become something much more significant. A simple journey would turn into a decisive moment, a turning point in their personal history, a moment where invisible hierarchies would be tested, and where the principles of respect and power would play out in unexpected ways. The Johnson family, Michael, Naomi, and their children Tosha and Amir, were frequent business-class travelers. However, unlike other passengers who were quick to flaunt their status, the Johnsons chose to live under the radar. They laughed at the stares and whispers. For them, the important thing was not to be seen, but to act with discretion and wisdom. Michael, a seasoned businessman and respected in the world of finance, knew that true power lay in the ability to keep a low profile. Naomi, his wife, a woman of natural elegance, shared the same philosophy. Their wealth and influence were impressive, but they were careful never to get carried away by the vanities of the world. Their trip to an international conference on philanthropy, where Michael would unveil a new initiative aimed at improving the living conditions of disadvantaged communities, was a perfect example of their commitment to not identify only with their material success. They had come to listen, learn, and contribute to a greater cause. Yet this journey would be marked by a series of hasty judgments, prejudices, and arrogance. When boarding, no special attention was given to the Johnson family. They were just another family, or at least that's what Captain Philippe Dumas, who led the flight, thought. Dumas, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and a stiff manner, had a reputation for being a meticulous pilot, but also for having an ego as big as the air he flew through. His arrogance wasn't obvious at first, but it showed in his subtle choices and snap judgments. He had his favorites, those passengers he considered worthy of his respect and attention, and then there were the others, those he treated with contempt, whom he considered too ordinary, or even unnecessary to his perception of the world. When the Johnson family boarded, Dumas barely glanced at them. He looked at them briefly, but his mind immediately focused on the passengers he considered to be in his circle, the men in suits and ties, the women with designer bags. Michael and Naomi, simple but elegant in appearance, were in his eyes passengers among many others, and he instantly relegated them to the category of those he could ignore. He assigned them seats in the back of business class, out of his line of sight, thinking they had nothing special to offer. What he didn't know was that the Johnsons weren't there to show off. They were there to travel like any other passenger, but also because they knew that, sometimes, it was necessary to blend in with the crowd to better observe, to better understand. The service began, and quickly the pilot's behavior became visible. During meal service, Dumas approached the hostess and whispered precise, almost contemptuous, instructions concerning certain passengers. He nodded towards the Johnsons, telling them not to take too much trouble with them. They are demanding customers, but unimportant, he said, not realizing that his words betrayed absurd arrogance and ignorance of the invisible hierarchies of society. The hostess, visibly under pressure, hastened to serve the Johnsons without smiling, contenting herself with mechanical gestures. Naomi, with her always polite smile, asked for a simple glass of water, but the hostess, almost embarrassed by the coldness of her superior, served her with a discreet pout, as if providing this service was a boring task. Michael observed the pilot's behavior calmly, but a glint of annoyance began to appear in his eyes. He knew that Dumas had no idea who he was in front of him, and he decided not to respond to this arrogance, preferring to step back and let events unfold. However, for Naomi, the situation was becoming more and more unbearable. She exchanged a look with Michael, a silent but meaningful look. She knew this kind of behavior couldn't go unanswered. Michael, like a thoughtful man, immediately understood what had to be done. At the end of the flight, as passengers stood up to leave the plane, the Johnson family took their time getting up, careful not to attract attention. But Dumas, arrogant and self-confident, stepped forward first, proud of his role, as always. He already imagined receiving congratulations from management for his professionalism and impeccable management of the flight. But what he didn't know was that the world would soon turn against him in ways he could never have imagined. As the passengers of the Lux Sky plane headed towards the exit, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. They expected to see political or diplomatic figures receive a warm welcome, to feel the excitement of the airport reserved for elites. But, to their surprise, elegant limousines stood in line, ready to transport them to unknown destinations. And at the end of the walkway, a crowd of photographers, their cameras ready to capture every moment, waited impatiently. The group of passengers froze for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. But it wasn't for them that the camera lenses were crackling. Attention instantly turned to Michael Johnson and his family. Michael, Naomi, Tosha and Amir walked calmly but with such majesty that it seemed they were nothing less than royals entering their domain. Captain Philippe Dumas, confident and full of the arrogance that had guided him throughout the flight, smiled inwardly, thinking that the attention was finally his. He told himself that his professionalism and his authority on board had finally been recognized, that he would be greeted with congratulations and praise. But then, a shattering truth came out, and the universe he had created around him shattered in an instant. The waiting limousines were not there for passing politicians or diplomats. They were all for the Johnson family, the true owners of Lux Sky Airlines, the company he had so disdained. The photographers were not there to immortalize an ordinary flight. No, they were there to capture the arrival of a family that embodied true greatness. Their curious and admiring glances rested on each member of the Johnson family, not for a single moment turning away from their dignified and calm demeanor. When Michael entered the airport lobby, the air suddenly changed. A heavy silence fell on the scene. The passengers, who had not noticed the Johnsons' true identity throughout the flight, suddenly realized that they had witnessed an extraordinary moment. Inside the lobby, the manager of Lux Sky, a man in his 50s, still impeccable in his tailored suit, walked towards Michael with an obvious bow. He held out his hand, a look of respect in his eyes. "Mr. Johnson, it's an honor," he said, his voice laced with visible sincerity. Michael responded with a polite nod, but his eyes remained fixed on the captain, who, until that moment, had not moved. It was then that the director turned to Dumas. The silence, already palpable, became almost heavy. He announced in a loud voice, so that all the witnesses present could hear. "Captain Dumas, this is Michael Johnson, the owner of this airline. You are now suspended from your duties, and an investigation will be opened into your matter." Dumas' face turned red in a split second. His legs suddenly seemed incapable of supporting him. He found himself caught in a whirlwind of confusion, humiliation, and shame he had never imagined. The director's words echoed in his head like a clap of thunder. He had been so sure of himself, so certain that his position, his authority and his superior judgment were unassailable. But in an instant, it all came crashing down. Dumas tried to apologize hastily, to find words to explain his behavior, to justify himself, but he was interrupted by a calm and serious voice. Michael, without raising his voice, turned towards him. His words were measured, but incredibly powerful. "Mr. Dumas, you got into the habit of judging people based on their appearance and their status, but you were monumentally wrong. You could not have known who you were addressing, and I assure you that everyone deserves the same respect. Your role here is to serve the passengers, to accompany them, to offer them impeccable service, and not to feel superior, to believe yourself above those you meet." Michael's words were a breath of fresh air, a rebuke without anger but implacably firm. Dumas, dejected, no longer knew where to stand. He had failed not only in his professional mission, but also in what he considered his human mission, to respect those who trusted him, regardless of appearance or status. Dumas's gaze was empty, as if he had just understood that the arrogance he had shown had ruined everything. He stood there, motionless, watching the Johnson family get into their limousines, who were waiting for them with the same elegance they had displayed throughout the flight. Michael and his family didn't need to yell, make a scene, or take ostentatious revenge. Their dignity was enough to win the battle. As he left, Michael turned briefly to the captain, but without another word. It was enough. He wasn't there to settle scores. He was there to remind us of a universal truth. Appearance defines nothing, and every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their status. When the Johnson family disappeared in the black limousine, leaving behind a stunned crowd, Philippe Dumas found himself alone in this reality that he had just discovered, a reality that he would probably have preferred to ignore. The shame of having judged without knowing, of having acted with misplaced arrogance, weighed on him like a stone. He now knew that sometimes one careless decision, one condescending attitude, could be enough to destroy a career, just like a reputation built over a lifetime of work.